So in these figures, you can actually see the changes in the brain that happen during Alzheimer's. So if you look at the diagram on the left, you can see that the brain actually does atrophy. And so you have a much larger ventricle space, but you can see that there is major atrophy in those areas in the frontal lobe that have to do with memory and language. And then if you look at the diagram on the right, so you can see the presence of amyloid plaque. So now when they are examining the brains of athletes who experience long-term concussions, so what they are seeing now is presence of amyloid plaques in these athletes who have passed away, who've had repeated concussions. So it really is quite scary and something to definitely be concerned about for anybody who plays any type of sport, particularly where there's risk of multiple concussions. But, so this is why they need to do a brain test, following death. Cost of Alzheimer's, I'm sure we all know it's an extremely expensive disease, and, lots of caregivers. Majority of the cost, about half the cost, is covered by Medicare. See, Medicaid. There are some out-of-pocket costs. People may have some long-term care insurance. We don't really know what the other is, maybe foundations or other types of charity. So it is, an incredible amount of cost. But as we have an aging population and we have more and more people going on Medicare, this is something that's going to concern all of us. Risk factors for Alzheimer's, of course, increasing age over 65. By the time people reach 85, they've got a 50% risk. I mean, my mother lived to, 85, and she had no signs of dementia at all. But yet I've had high school friends who've had parents who've had dementia, and it's just very, very scary. There are early onset varieties, so people who have a family history of Alzheimer's. So people can start to get Alzheimer's in their, late 40s, 50s, early 60s. So, it's very, very scary. They have reduced synthesis of acetylcholine. So there is a genetic predisposition and family history. And high cholesterol is another factor. Not surprisingly, the amyloid plaque buildup. And head trauma, as we already talked, especially including sports. 10 warning signs from an Alzheimer's Association. So, everybody has some memory lapses, but it's when they become, chronic, and when they really seem to be, serious. For example, everybody forgets things from now and then, but, it doesn't necessarily affect your daily life. Say, you're driving and, people don't remember where they live, or they don't recognize their house. They can't solve problems. They can't complete tasks. So cooking becomes a challenge. They don't know place and time. Spatial relationships, new problems with words, like they just can't remember the words for something. And I mean, everybody does that from time to time, but they do it on a more current basis. So instead of, calling the tomato, a tomato, they might call it the red thing or a red ball, misplacing things, and then they can't find them with an inability to trace them. So misplacing your keys is not a problem, but putting your keys in your refrigerator and not remembering repeatedly that you keep putting your keys in the refrigerator is an issue. Poor judgment. So unfortunately you hear about, unscrupulous contractors that try to take the senior citizens for their money, home repair and other caregivers who are supposed to be watching out for them. Social withdrawal, so they're just not as social as they used to be. And then changes in mood or personality. So people can really become quite aggressive and very nasty. Someone who had been, very pleasant starts to see a major personality change.